Welcome to lesson 50 of our interactive notes, where we will be adding fractions with denominators of 10 and 100. So we're going to go to pages 49 and 50. Okay, you will need a highlighter for this, or a colored pencil or something light. You won't need it a lot, just for a few things. Our content objective for 4th grade NF numbers, operations, fractions, C5. I can show a fraction with the denominator of 10 as an equivalent fraction with the denominator of 100 in order to add the two fractions. Language objective. I can use vocabulary related to fractions to explain how to use equivalent fractions to add fractions. Social objective. I can work with others to create models to prove how equivalent fractions are used to add fractions. To add fractions, the fractions must have like denominators. That is what we've been doing when we've been adding and subtracting fractions and mixed numbers. They have always had the same denominator or common denominators, like denominators. When you get into 5th grade, that won't be the case. You will be adding and subtracting fractions with unlike denominators. So you will need to make a change to 1 because they must have the same denominator to add them. This is the only time we will be doing it, is with tens and hundreds, because that is our standard. But you will use exactly what we're doing to be able to find an equivalent fraction with the same denominator, so then you can add and subtract. So here we want to add these two fractions, but 10 and 100 are not the same, so we have to change one so that they're the same. So we're going to change 7/10 into an equivalent fraction with a denominator of 100, because that's what we need to get to. To convert it, to change it to an equivalent fraction with the denominator of 100, you multiply both by 10. We always multiply both because we're cutting this into 10 equal pieces, and we have to cut the shaded part into 10 equal pieces. We don't do it separately. So we get 70 over 100. Now, instead of 7/10, we have 70 over 100. Now that they're common, we can add them and get 93 hundredths. 70 plus 23 is 93 hundredths. Now we're going to show what exactly we did with our model here. So 7/10 would be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 columns. If we look back at our previous lesson, where we were looking at equivalent fractions, we could remember that to get 7/10, you would fill in 7 of those columns. So we fill in 7 columns to represent our 70, our 7/10, or 70 100ths, and then we fill in 10, 20, 1, 2, 3 hundredths, and we end up with the total being 93 hundredths. With only 7 hundredths left over. So that's what we're going to be looking at here. So first we have to figure out what these are representing. I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 tenths plus 10, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26, 27 hundredths. I can't add them together because these are definitely not the same size pieces. I need them to be the same size. So I need to find an equivalent fraction for 5 tenths. Well, if I cut all these columns, if I cut each one of these into 10 equal pieces, then I would get 50 hundredths. So that gives me an equivalent fraction with that common denominator. So now that they are equivalent, 50 hundredths plus 27 hundredths, 50 plus 27 is 77 hundredths. Okay, so here we have 10, 11, 12, 13, 14 hundredths plus 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 tenths. Before I continue with this one, 77's odd, 100's even, so I can't divide both by 2. And I can't divide both by 5 because they don't end in a 0 or 5. And the only factors for 100 are either even or a multiple of 5. So this is our simplest form. This, though, we will be able to simplify at the end, so we'll want to look at that as well. So 14 hundredths and 8 tenths. I'm going to cut my tenths into 10 equal pieces so that I get my equivalent fraction with a denominator of 100, 80 hundredths. Now that I have an equivalent fraction, an equivalent fraction to this with a common denominator, a denominator of 100, I can now add them. 14 hundredths plus 8 hundredths. 14 plus 8 more is, 80 more is 94 hundredths. Both of those are even, so I can divide both by 2. They have the common factor of 2. Half of 100 is 50. Half of 90 I can't do, but half of 80 I can. Half of 80 is 4. And then that leaves 14. Half of 14 is 7. So both of these would work. It's just good to be able to find the equivalent fraction in lowest terms or the simplest form to be able to use in other things. The smaller the numbers, the easier it is to use. All right, here we have 1/10 plus 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 71, 72, 73, 74, 75, 76. 76 hundredths. That's what we have to begin with. So I need to take my 1/10 and cut it into 10 equal pieces each so I can find that equivalent fraction with a denominator of 100. So I get 10 hundredths. So now I can replace this with the equivalent fraction of 10 hundredths. And now that I have a common denominator, I can add them. 10 plus 76 is 86. Now these are both even, so I can divide both by 2. Half of 100 is 50. Half of 80 is 40. Half of 6 is 3. So these are both correct. It's just good to be able to get to its simplest form or the equivalent fraction in lowest terms. Here we have 2/10, and we have 10, 20, 30, 40, 52 hundredths. Definitely not the same size pieces, so I have to get them into the same size by either multiplying or dividing. So I'm going to multiply by 10. That will cut each one of these into 10 pieces, so it'll be like this. And I would have 20 out of 100. So if I cut each one into 10 equal pieces, I would end up with 20 shaded in out of 100. That is now an equivalent fraction. So I can replace it. And now that they have the same denominator, I can add them. 20 plus 52 is 72. They are both even, but actually I already also know that they're both divisible by 4. You may not know that, that's okay. So here I get 25 because 4 quarters is 25 cents. I can get 10 40s out of 72, that leaves 32, and then that's 18. So both of these are correct. Just want to get you used to seeing the simplest form, the equivalent fraction in lowest terms. Okay, and then our last one down here, we have 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 9 hundredths plus 3/10. So I gotta change these because they're not the same size pieces. So I'm going to cut each of these up into 10 pieces, and that gives me 30 hundredths. So now that I have an equivalent fraction with a common denominator, I can replace that 3/10 with the 30 hundredths, and then I can add those together now that they're common. And I get 99 hundredths. There's nothing I can divide both of those by, so it is in its simplest form. So really what I just did is I took these 3 columns and I filled them into these 3 columns. So there's just only this little one square that's not filled in. So 99, just missing 1. Alright, so now let's go ahead and practice more with adding fractions with denominators of 10 and 100 with our 3-column notes.